Time now for another edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With us, as always, Jeffri Chadiha from the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We want to cover who are the biggest challengers to the Kansas City Chiefs trying to three-peat. Is it just as simple as, hey, the San Francisco 49ers were there in the end. They're the odds-on favorite. A lot of betting markets. Are they the top dog? Baltimore Ravens were the AFC championship game opponent. Is it there, or are there some new challengers, and why are these teams the teams that are the biggest threats for the Kansas City Chiefs? We're talking about it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeffri Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running here as we enter the month of July. Gentlemen, we're getting very close to training camp, so it's time to start measuring who are the real challengers for these Kansas City Chiefs. And, of course, always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, as Curtis said. Also, our good friends at Northland Injury Law. If you've got a case, call 816-400-HURT or text HURT, H-U-R-T, to 22222. Jeff, how about it? What did you find yourself coming up against in putting together your list of who are the biggest challengers for these Kansas City Chiefs?
I actually did a similar exercise for my website a few months ago, and it was framed as who's most likely to win a championship if it's not the Chiefs. So I almost fell into that trap of evaluating the teams based on that. And then I started to think more about it. It's better to do it from the standpoint of who do you think they might end up facing, or who would be the biggest obstacle if they actually played each other. So I went more from the mindset of, like, these are the teams they're probably going to see at some point. These are the teams that can beat them.
Okay. Sam, what was your view of it? You always like to come up with something off the wall and wacky that's easily defendable and probably right. What was your approach?
Well, it stood out to me that a lot of the teams that I think are the top contenders, even the teams that did still make my list, I don't think did a lot to improve in the offseason. I thought a lot of these teams lost some key depth pieces. Maybe their lines are a little bit worse. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that the teams – it seems every year there's a contender for the Chiefs, and then we see that team get better. I don't know that we have the obvious this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's kind of where I came at too. Like, who are – if you just take – because usually all the power polls start with last year's finish. Basically, you can line them up, and here's who it is, right? Maybe the Texans are a hot darling. Maybe they'll be on one of the lists because they have a young quarterback and added a lot of pieces to the puzzle. But kind of last year's finish is usually this year's start. And I'm with you. As I went through the depth charts on teams, I'm like, not better, not better, not better. Buffalo's getting all the headlines for being the team that's not better because they lost Stefon Diggs, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I think the 49ers, if you look over on the NFC, and probably, at least I know mine is, AFC slanted, but the 49ers lost depth pieces. They're coming up against the cap. So, yeah, I think it was an interesting exercise to kind of review what everybody's done and get your arms around what everybody's going to be working with as we head into 2024. And so looking at it from the perspective, Jeff, you had one exercise you did for NFL.com. Let's start with you. We're going to go 1 to 5 because we found, the drama 5 to 1. Like, a lot of times who one's going to be. Yeah. And one, as Sam put it to us, forces the one who puts somebody up higher than everybody else to have to defend their work, right? So we start top to bottom. Who's the number one contender to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs? The number one team they've got to contend with, Jeff.
It's easy. It's the 49ers. They are the odds-on favorite. They're the team that the Chiefs faced in the Super Bowl and beat. Most of their pieces are back. The important pieces are back, I would say. They should have a chip on their shoulder now. Having 2 chances at a championship with pretty much the same core and not getting it done has got to drive you. I was in the room with Kyle Shanahan after that game and saw a look on his face and having to answer these same questions again. For my money, the Chiefs won the game. They were the back-to-back champions. They're going for the three-peat, but the Niners were still the better team to me on paper. And they're probably still, if you look at all the rosters around the NFL, they're probably still the best roster in the NFL. So you got Brock Purdy with another year, a big year for him, obviously. With a contract coming up, being eligible for a big extension. But, we'll see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. But it seems like they're starting to talk about possibilities for him still being there. But all the weapons are still there. Nick Bosa on the other side, Fred Warner. We'll see what happens with Trey Greenlaw when he's able to get back to play again after that Achilles tear. But I think overall, I think this is the best team in football.
That's interesting. I've got the 49ers on my list. They're not number one. I'll say that. But I think you laid it out perfectly. I think as long as they have a quarterback that's going to play at a high level, will he play that well again? I mean, usually you're a rookie, you play better once you get some experience under your belt, but we've also seen some guys regress. There's a guy on the Chiefs roster right now, Carson Wentz, who regressed and was, no longer considered a starter. So can he duplicate that? If Brock Purdy can duplicate it, pretty impressive. But, are they going to move a wide receiver? What team are we going to see when it's all said and done? I do agree. I think they're a salty bunch, but not at the top of my list. Sam, thoughts on the 49ers? Did they crack your list, first of all?
Yeah, they're on my list, but I would just echo your sentiments. They're not number one.
Wow.
I'll go ahead and say my number one because it's part of the reason that the 49ers are not. And first of all, my headliner on this is it was tough to find a number one. I thought I had 3 or 4 that were more in like that 2 to 3 range and kind of waiting on that. Where's the number one team here? But I'm going with the Bengals. And the reason I'm going with the Bengals is they have the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL. They have a last place schedule this year. And so the team most likely, I think, to get a home game in the playoffs against the Chiefs is the Cincinnati Bengals. And therefore, that would be the Chiefs' most difficult game in a playoff path. I'm like, the Super Bowl's on turf this year, indoors. Patrick Mahomes just kills it indoors. And so I think he's going to have a leg up on some NFC teams, which is why my list is going to be AFC heavy. But the Bengals, obviously they get Joe Burrow back. I do think they've got weaknesses, particularly on the offensive line. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying this is a team without its flaws. But they allowed the most explosive plays in the NFL last year. And we saw that against the Chiefs with Rashee Rice, completely busted coverage. The first time he got deep and caught a pass all season was in, what was that? Like week 14, maybe week 15. Because of a busted coverage. Like they at least addressed the safety position. I would have liked to have seen them address it with a more experienced player, but they do bring back Von Bell, who was part of the defense that I thought that the recipe on beating the Chiefs was this make them, nickel and dime you. I just thought the Bengals executed that better than anybody. That AFC Championship game where they beat the Chiefs, it was the best execution we have seen of that plan. And I think they're more back to maybe the guys that can execute that plan again. And let's keep in mind, if the Chiefs do have to travel there, they haven't won in Cincinnati in like 3 decades. It's a real thing playing a team that gets to play the Chiefs, having won in that moment before. So like I said, I don't know that they're a clear-cut number one because I don't think there is a clear-cut number one on my list. But the fact that the Chiefs could have to go there with the Bengals getting a last place schedule this year, that's why they are number one on my list.
I hate what I'm about to say. That's why I'll say something good. You said Patrick Mahomes kills it indoors. Gann Asphalt and Concrete kills it when it comes to your parking lots. How's that for a transition? For 30 years, Gann Asphalt and Concrete has been solving parking lot issues, whatever they are. One contractor, all things parking lot, whether it's seal coating. Get that signed up right now. A lot of people wait to the last minute. All of a sudden the weather's dropping and you're racing the clock, racing Mother Nature. Not a good spot to be in. Get your seal coating done now. A brightly striped lot helps cut down on accidents. Anything you need, any kind of repairs or building the lot itself. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, solving parking lot problems in Kansas City since 1994. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. What I hate that I'm going to say is I agree exactly with what Sam said about the Bengals. I, too, have the Bengals at the top of my list for a lot of the reasons. Although with T. Higgins, with or without T. Higgins is big. And I think he's ultimately going to play because I don't think guys that were on second-round contracts are in a position to turn down whatever. What is it? What's the franchise tag?
21.8.
$22 million. I think he may sit out most of camp, but he'll be back in for the Bengals. I like Jermaine Burton as an addition to fill in for Tyler Boyd. I think, he's kind of had some attitude problems and maybe never realized his potential at Georgia or Alabama. But I think he's the real deal athletically. And if he can buy in and be focused, they still have a three-headed monster. Their offensive line is giant, should be better from that standpoint. The question is, can the defense come back? But I go to what Jeff said. I mean, when he put Joe Burrow on a previous podcast up on the list and was talking about it, he is the one guy that's done it. Now, I know a lot of detractors or naysayers or people just citing facts, and call them whatever you want, have pointed out that a lot of times it's been his defense that have got it done late in games, but he's got it done early in games. He's the only guy that seems to have any kind of claim other than Tom Brady to having a little bit of something on Patrick Mahomes. And so I think that's real. And I think the Bengals are in that bounce back mode. I'm with Sam and Jeff. I know you went to the 49ers and I can see why you get there, but I didn't have the team that was like, this is the undisputed heavyweight champ of contenders, because it was kind of a jockeying for position. So why not the guy who's done it against Patrick Mahomes? And I think generally speaking, kind of like Baltimore came from off the radar last year to be the one seed. That's what we usually see. If it's not the Chiefs, it's a team you weren't kind of expecting that maybe had an easier schedule early or easier schedule throughout the year, gets the ball rolling, gets that momentum, and has a year. I think a step back from Baltimore would just be playing the math, and that opens the door for somebody else. Why not the Bengals? And if they can get to that one seed, everything Sam said is right. Tough place for the Chiefs to play. Jeff, you have the Bengals somewhere on your list?
They're two. That could have been one easily. I mean, I hear what you guys are saying, and it was, again, I went with the 49ers because I think they're the best team in football. And so that was the only thing they had over the Bengals. But everything you're saying is right. If the Chiefs don't get back to the Super Bowl, the Bengals will be the team that beats them. I totally believe that because they have everything you guys just said, starting with Joe Burrow. But really, you have to have a certain level of confidence and cockiness, but also respect when you play the Chiefs. And I think you have to have that combination. I think you have to feel good about yourself. You got to think you can do some things that you probably can't do, but then you also have to understand what they can do. And that's really where Baltimore failed last year. They had two of those things, but the respect wasn't there. And you saw the way they played as a result, where I feel like the Bengals always know that they got to play an A-plus game to beat the Chiefs. And usually they play that game on offense and defense. And I agree with Sam. I think that they had a tough lesson that they learned losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell last year at safety. It affected what Lou Anarumo wanted to do on defense. Getting Bell back means something. I think Geno Stone is a really good pickup for them in free agency as the other safety spot. But moving Daxton Hill from corner to corner from safety is a big thing for them because they become a lot more athletic at corner. Now you have a guy who can do a lot more things, from blitzing to covering and the nickel. And so I like their potential with that group. They got some grumpy guys over there. Trey Hendrickson's in that group too. He wanted to trade. He's not happy about his contract, but ultimately, when Burrow's there, they find a way to unite and get things done.
I think that's just it. Is like it's maybe that's why we don't have a definitive number one over on the AFC side. If you're a believer in the Niners, I can understand that, and I've got San Fran too as well from that standpoint. So I can chime in on that here in a second, but I do think that all the teams I'm going to present from the AFC are highly volatile, including one that I know I'm going to get bombed for by everybody. So,
Great.
If it clicks,
is that true?
It's going to be. It's always the part of the show I look most forward to.
Yeah, I know. Be the whipping boy. But the 49ers, I'll just say this to add on to what you said about the Niners, Jeff, is if they're healthy, they're hell on wheels, right? Like that's the big thing for them. If they're healthy. But I think, they're finally running up against that cap. And I don't know that the depth piece is there. And I don't know. We'll see what happens if they lose a Brandon Ayuk, if they trade a Deebo Samuel, if they move one of those offensive pieces. What does that do? When it's all said and done for the ability for Brock Purdy to be as good as he can be. I think that's a question mark. Sam, who's at number 2 on yours?
Yeah, well, one more point on the Bengals, which is, you can't have done something until you have the opportunity. But Joe Burrow is the only current quarterback in the NFL to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And I do think that means something. Not everything, but it does mean something.
For sure.
I've actually got the Lions number 2. I think they're the best team in the NFC.
Wow. Okay.
Jeff, I mean, you said that you thought the 49ers were the best team on the field in the Super Bowl, even though they didn't win that game. The Lions could say the same about the NFC Championship. I mean, they outplayed the 49ers for most of that game. And I think that the Lions, I opened the show by saying I thought a lot of the contending teams got slightly worse in the offseason. I think the Lions got slightly better. I think they addressed their biggest needs on defense. There's particularly in their secondary, they pick up some experience in their secondary. So I like their depth. And I thought that their depth was probably the biggest issue on defense last year. And a lot of the offensive guys are the same. I think maybe they get more comfortable in figuring out how to use Jahmyr Gibbs, although I don't like all the reports early on about him being a receiver again, because I think they have receivers and they've got a tight end. I think that, it was terrific as a rookie. That's only going to get better. So I think there's reasons to believe that their skill position players on offense will be even better, and their depth is definitely better on defense. So they're the team that's on this list that I think has pretty evidently grown compared to some of the other ones on the list.
Jeff, are you down with the Lions? They did not. I will say this: we've reached our first team that did not make my list.
Let's make Jeff argue against the Lions.
Yeah. I can't really, because they're not too far away from where you're talking about. They're a couple rungs down the ladder where I'm at with them, but I hear everything you're saying, man. The thing about the Lions, having Ben Johnson there is huge.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Jeff, but please underscore that point, because that's the one thing I left out. They have 2 good coordinators, I think, and I think that matters in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's huge for them. I think holding on, you see it with the Chiefs, holding on to your coordinators, having people there who bring that consistency and chemistry is huge. I'm curious to see what Jameson Williams does this year, the receiver out of Alabama they got a couple of years ago, because people forget when they drafted him, they moved up to 12 to get him. And he was supposed to be, of all the guys they drafted, the biggest home run. And he hasn't been that yet. So if he's able to get it going as a deep threat, I love their offense. I think adding Terry and Arnold, getting Enos Rakestraw at corner, you bring in Carlton Davis, you short up the secondary a lot. It's hard to pick against them. Yeah, I think that they will be tough, and it really comes down to where that NFC Championship game is played at again.
I, as a guy who has Jameson Williams and been waiting on him for several years on my dynasty team, would love to see that actually happen. I think it is a great point because he was a huge talent. I think the Chiefs were kind of sweet on him as well, as a guy that would fit their offense. And that really would give them just threats all over the field. But offense wasn't their problem last year.
No.
Right. And so I think a lot of it does depend upon them fixing the defense. Right. And maybe the moment not being too big. I didn't put the Lions on my list just because teams that kind of come from nowhere. And I know they've been building the year before, they were close. Usually you get there, you taste it, then you get kind of fat and happy and you regress back.
Yeah, there's something to that for sure.
I expect the Lions to be on this list in next year. Right. But I will not be shocked. And I'll say this, if Dan Campbell has him up at the top of the NFC again, then Dan Campbell's the real deal. He's obviously a quality coach, but if you're going to be a championship coach, you don't let the team regress back. And so that's what I want to see out of the Detroit Lions.
Well, Soren, let me ask you this. How much of it is the division they're playing is going to be tougher this year?
It is, but I think the Packers are a regression candidate too because of their surge late. They could have that fallback. The Bears should be better, but I don't think the Bears are going to be world beaters. I don't think they're with a rookie quarterback going to come from no playoffs to be in the number 1 seed. So yeah, I'm not completely sold. I think the division is better for sure, but I'm not sold. And the Vikings to me are a wild card with a rookie quarterback. I'm not sold. Yes, it'll be better, but it might be a bunch of 9 and 8s and an 8 and 9, and somebody takes it at 10 and 7. I wouldn't be shocked if they all end up in that same spot. The Lions are the team that better do it. It'll be a disappointment if the division goes that way. The division's supposed to go Lions like 13 and 4 or 12 and 5, with the Packers maybe a game behind that, or there to pick up the pieces if Jared Goff gets hurt or something and steal it. But I've heard that before, and it doesn't always play out that way.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Right.
But Sam's the one who picked him.
Yeah.
It's kind of quiet over there.
I mean, I thought I had like 4 teams that you could have shuffled up here in the top 4. It goes back to what I said about not really having a number 1. Well, I thought that my top 4 teams were pretty equal.
Okay. Let's go with number 3, Jeff. You're gonna shock and awe us with somebody. Come on, give me some Bears action here.
Nah, I'm not going there yet. I got one surprise in there, but it's not going to be here. It's going to be the Ravens.
Okay.
And I feel like the Ravens, again, it all depends on their offensive line. If they're able to get their offensive line figured out, and they've had a history of doing that, they've hit with guys they've drafted and developed. They found veteran free agents. They found a way to mix and match and make it work. So I think they will do that. But ultimately, again, this was a team that I thought when they started playing the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, they were the better team, and they wound up losing because they didn't know how to execute against the Chiefs. And so at some point, if you're John Harbaugh and you're Lamar Jackson, you got to solve that puzzle. The reason I don't like them, the reason I like the Bengals better than the Ravens is the Bengals know how to do this. The Ravens are still a big question mark in these big games. I think they could beat them in week 1, but I think they could see them in the postseason and blow it again. But they have enough pieces there, especially on offense, especially on defense. I think that they, even losing Mike McDowell, they elevate Zach Orr to defensive coordinator. Everything's there for them to still be a really good team that can give the Chiefs problems. It just depends on if they actually execute.
Yeah. I, too, have the Ravens at number 3. And the reason I don't have them higher and the reason I think they could be a little bit suspect is they've been very good. The last 6 years, win totals for the Ravens under John Harbaugh, 10, 14, 11, 8, 10, 13. This feels more like the 10-7 year, right? Like I just am counting on, I don't have this personnel spot, that personnel. Part of it is just injuries, knockout. Everybody evaluates teams right now at 100%. And that's not what's going to set sail, right? That's not certainly going to be what arrives at the port that they're headed towards. You're going to have to take damage along the way. And John Harbaugh's record shows that they can take on water and still get to the postseason. The question is, can they be dominant? And can Lamar Jackson continue to grow as a passer? And to this point, we've been waiting on him for a while. He's been paid. He's been in and out. And we haven't seen him put together 12 wins after 13 wins after 12 wins. I just expect an 11-10 win season out of the Ravens. But I do think they're really good, and I'm with you. If that offensive line is healthy and they're back to running the ball and they ground and pound some people, and then Lamar Jackson is, like I said, he has to get better as a passer. Not a lot better because he's really good, right? But I am curious about him losing weight. I'm not sure what that's all about. Guy never looked fat to me. That puzzles me a little bit. The Ravens will be there in the end. I just don't know that they'll be a world beater. And I don't know that Lamar Jackson has it in him to drive the Ravens down to get a touchdown with 1:51 to go on the clock. And I think that's something that's necessary. But I still, I too have them at that number 3 spot. Sam?
Yeah, I've got the Ravens 3rd as well. But I think the Ravens are like probably the best example of this entire exercise of what made it difficult were, with last year's team alone, I think I'd have them ranked first. I worry about their offensive line, and I worry about the fact that they didn't do a whole lot in the offseason to get better. I mean, I still think Derrick Henry's got enough left to start for the Baltimore Ravens. I think the fact that he runs downhill, the fact that the Ravens running game is a lot of downhill for at least for their running back, it's a good fit. But like the headline of your offseason should not be talking about your upgrades at running back. And that's what it is for the Ravens. And so
they didn't have any. They lost them all.
Yeah. But and I agree. When the Ravens were a better team all last year than the Chiefs were because they were really good defensively. They were really good offensively. But I would have liked to have seen them, give Lamar Jackson some more guys to throw the ball to. And instead they lose Odell Beckham Jr., who, is getting, got paid more than he should have, but still was an effective player in that offense. And they didn't really replace him. And to Soren's point about injury potential, their best wide receiver is my size. And like, I don't know that he's going to make it through a 17-game season. And if he doesn't, I'm like, who are the Ravens going to throw the ball to out wide?
Yeah.
It's a real question, but that's why I think they're the best example for this entire exercise is, man, can you find some flaws about this team? And I still have them third on my list.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman, the fact that they are continuing to run out, ask any fantasy football player about Rashad Bateman. They've bought that tease. Everybody, first it was early and then it's late in drafts and auctions, and it never comes home.
Yeah.
Nelson Aguilar. I do like Devontae Walker. I think it was a nice pick, but to think a fourth-round pick is going to step in and be a star right away is highly unlikely.
I think the tight end, that second tight end, likely. I think he's the key for their passing game because they saw some guys emerge outside of Zay Flowers that could be useful for them. Keaton Mitchell coming back from injury. I think they will still be a good offense. Whether they're an explosive, dangerous offense depends on some of these younger guys either growing up or coming back healthy.
We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, helping people with serious injuries, car accidents, work accidents, falls, other serious personal injuries. Their attorneys have been serving KC for more than 40 years. They don't get paid unless they get money for their clients. That's right. They don't get paid unless you get paid. Northland Injury Law voted #1 accident lawyer in Kansas City. Don't wait. Get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT, H-U-R-T, to 22222. Again, if you have a case, text HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. Call right now. The choice of a lawyer is an important one. Should not be based solely upon advertisements. Text HURT 22222. Get connected 24/7. All right, we're down to number 4, and I dare say that this is where we're going to start getting some, diversion of the pass, I'm guessing.
Well, Soren, let me go first because I've got the 49ers, and it's already overlapped with
That's right. Okay, you haven't gotten there. All right.
With the teams that you guys have. But I can tell you why they're fourth on my list and not second, which is why did the Chiefs beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl? Because Chris Jones tore up the interior offensive line. But that was a weakness for the 49ers the entire season. Chris Jones getting pressure up the middle cost them 2 touchdowns. They had 2 wide open wide receivers that if they win against Chris Jones, they score 2 touchdowns. They don't execute it because their interior offensive line was a problem all year. Like in drop back sets, the 49ers are one of the 6 worst teams in the NFL at pass pro in pure drop back sets. I know Kyle Shanahan has a lot of motion, a lot of play action to try and buy his offensive line time, but he has to buy his offensive line time. And I just don't think they did enough to address that. They do draft the kid from KU, Dominic
Puni.
Yeah, they draft him in the 3rd round. I can't remember the last time an NFL team said we added a Kansas Jayhawk. We're good here.
I think it's never happened. Since Gale Sayers.
I joke because Lance Leipold's doing some things at KU. Like that's going to be a thing eventually here. But they didn't do it enough to address their very biggest weakness, the reason they lost the Super Bowl. And I just like their offensive line's getting older too. I don't know that I'm banking on a year of regression from Trent Williams, the guy that plays at the top of his game for the last 15 years. But I still have so many questions about the most important part of the game for them.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Although I do think that there's so much talent, like so much frontline talent. But I think it's a great point. The offensive line is a problem for them.
Yeah, they're still fourth on my list, right? But that's just why they're not second on my list.
When you asked why didn't they beat the Chiefs, I was going to say, I don't know, not knowing the rules, not executing on special teams. I hear what you're saying. I agree. You picked the biggest weakness that they've got as a team, and that was something Eric Eager beat the drum for all throughout last year. Was there a problem on the offensive line that it was overrated? But there's always a lot that goes into any one game. All right, so that's number 4. So now we've got Jeff. Who do you got at number 4?
Lions. And really, a lot of things we talked about earlier. I think the division, you make a good point about that. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams come together. But ultimately, I feel like the NFC has just got a much easier path for teams like the Niners and the Lions to get the Super Bowl. Really, I'd put the Eagles in there as the only other team, maybe the Packers on a good day, but really it's the Lions and the Niners dueling it out to get back to the NFC Championship game and having a shot to get the Super Bowl. So for me, they got the easiest path going as compared to the AFC teams we're talking about. And I feel like there is a little bit of, it's Dan Campbell's been great at managing success and expectations and getting that team fired up. You never know when the younger guys start showing up and thinking it's just going to happen for you. And so that's the only question I have is, have they been doing such a good job of getting over the top and getting to the mountaintop, getting up the mountaintop, that now they're kind of like, all right, we're here. We're going to go out and get it done. And that's when you get dinged. So I'm a little bit worried about maybe some inflated egos coming into this season for those guys.
Interesting. All right. Like I said, Lions did not make my list. So I have, not that I only have one NFC team. We've already done it, the 49ers. The rest of mine are on the AFC. So I will go next with the Houston Texans. I'm not 100% sold that I love every personnel move that they made, but they are definitely trying, and they are definitely recognizing the moment. The moment is that they have a really talented quarterback who, based upon how he stood in against the rush, I don't see much chance of a regression. We throw a few more interceptions, probably because I think he'll start trying to feel how to make more big plays. He'll have more confidence. So he'll have some ups and downs, as every young quarterback does, but he's a playmaker. There's no doubt about it. And they went out and brought in a lot of talent to try to fix everything. They've got a top-shelf edge rusher. They've got a top-shelf quarterback that are young and in their prime and should only get better. And they really, by going out and getting Stefan Diggs, gave the security blanket that maybe, now I don't believe you're getting vintage Stefan Diggs here. I think you're getting downslope Stefan Diggs, but I still think you're getting a guy that will move the chains. I think he's more of that than he is the explosive big play mover. Didn't have 100 yards receiving over the last 10, 12, 13 games, whatever that number was for the Buffalo Bills. But I do like what they've done. They've got a left tackle. They're good at the places that matter. And I think they did a really nice job of solidifying the roster. And if that quarterback does take another step forward, if he has a year two the way Patrick Mahomes did, or let's say he has 80, 85, 90%, if he is in the discussion for being an MVP, that is very well could be the team that the Chiefs are playing in the AFC Championship game. I don't know what's not to like about the Houston Texans. They're number 4 on my list.
Yeah, I'll follow that because they're 5 on my list.
Okay.
And all the same reasons. And you mentioned Stefan Diggs. I don't think they need him to be what he was in Buffalo. I think they need him to be what Odell Beckham was with the Rams, which is just be a guy who can make plays for us and set the tone with your emotion and your attitude and not be a headache. And I think Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, they already had a really good receiving core. Adding Joe Mixon in, you got a guy catch the ball in the backfield for you and do some things in the run game. And so, and defense, D'Amico Ryan was already going to be a guy who could do a lot with that bunch, but adding Danielle Hunter to it, I just don't see – the thing they have going for them that I really like is they've got that kind of confidence the Bengals had a couple years ago. And they had the kind of confidence that the Chiefs had when they start – once you're a young team, and you start realizing you're not just good, but really good, like championship caliber good, that's when it's time to get on board and start believing in them, because the C.J. Stroud I watched play last year was not the same guy I watched play in college. He was a great player in college, but I didn't see him being a guy who would lift the entire franchise up. And when you have that kind of quarterback, like a Mahomes, like a Joe Burrow, you can do anything. I don't think they would be afraid to face the Chiefs in a playoff game one bit.
No. With free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty, GAN Asphalt and Concrete keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. They're the best. Kansas City's 30-year. They reached their 30-year anniversary. They've been Kansas City's best. Since then, solving parking lot problems, you can find them online at GANAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338, GAN Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Sam, I saw Rye smile. Are we going to get anything entertaining here at 5, or are you just going to drop the Texans in?
Yeah, so the top 4 teams on my list I thought were pretty interchangeable, and then there was another group of about 4 teams that I thought I was picking from.
4.
Give us the 3 that didn't make it.
The 3 that didn't make it were the Bills, the Browns.
The Browns? Wow, okay.
And the Jets. But the team that does make it is the Texans. I agree with you guys on the Texans. Now, I do see a potential regression in C.J. Stroud, which is not his own fault. I think it's because of how defenses will play him. Like, he is not going to lead the NFL in average depth of target again this year the way he did last year. He is going to see a lot more too high. You referenced Patrick Mahomes' second year. It's why his numbers were worse than his first years, because defenses played him differently. That's going to happen with CJ Stroud, and it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to adjust to that. I agree that he's got the playmaking ability, and the way we use that term is just like when the play isn't going right, what happens next? Like, he's got that ability in him that he'll still survive that era, but like, it's going to be an adjustment for CJ Stroud in year two. And look, I agree with you guys on Stefon Diggs. They don't need him to be a number one wide receiver. They do need him to be okay with not being a number one or a number two wide receiver. And that's a question that they brought into their locker room this year that could potentially be disruptive. I mean, you mentioned Odell Beckham Jr. It's a great example because he became okay with not being the guy on every play. That's still a to be determined nature with Stefon Diggs this year. So I like the Texans, but I'm cautiously putting them at 5th on the list.
Okay. Yeah. I listen. Why do you believe? Like, if you had to predict right now, do you believe that CJ Stroud is the real deal?
Yes. But what I'm saying is, my belief in that does not mean he's going to have the statistical season that he had last year necessarily.
No, I would agree, but I to me that's like the big starting point is, do you have the quarterback, right? Is there going to be somebody that's going to make this list that doesn't have a great quarterback? Sure. Or in the end is one of the close ones? Yes, there'll probably be someone who emerges and outplays. The schedule smiles on him, injury smile on him, those kind of things. And somebody gets there. Yes, but like, you begin with the quarterback, and I think that kid's the real deal. And so a regression statistically, perhaps, but clutch time, I think the kid will be there. And so I think if you believe in him, you have to believe in the Texans. That's so much of the gift, or so much of the equation, is if the quarterback can get it right, you can score late, you can score short, you're going to win games.
Yeah, sure.
All right, number 5. So I think all of yours are super predictable. Bills, Browns, and Jets, I think, is interesting. I, too, considered the Buffalo Bills they were the team that probably got cut, but I didn't want to just have what everybody else had. And so I said, okay, Texans aren't really coming from off the radar because of what they did at the end. So who would be that off the radar team? Who's the team that comes from not being in the playoffs to being a challenger and maybe could upset the Kansas City Chiefs along the way? And I think there's a team that will not try to out-Chiefs the Chiefs if they play them. We'll go in and recognize we probably have a 1-4 shot here, but we're going to have to play a conservative style. We're going to have to ground and pound. We're going to have to keep the football away. And also, they play them twice during the regular season. And so I will take the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they are the wild. I'm giving you the reason why. The Bills are a better team on paper, for sure, even without Stefon Diggs. But to me, there will be somebody that comes like the Texans did, right? The Texans were kind of a threat. They fought the Ravens, the 1 seed, for about a half, right? They were in the game. If anyone's going to do that or maybe go a little bit further, the Chargers, we've talked about their roster for a long time, right? And people have liked a lot of things on their roster. Now, I know they let their receivers go, but I think it's more about the quarterback and more about the offensive coordinator than it is the receivers. I think the Chiefs have proven that. So I don't think they're going to have as big a drop-off as other people do. I like Ladd McConkey, but I don't think he's going to be fantastic. I am nervous about Quentin Johnson being one of your top targets there. But I'm basing most of this on some premium talent, a quarterback, and I believe in Jim Harbaugh. And I think they will be in a let's show coach what I can do mode, and you're going to get a great first year. And if anybody's going to come from off the pack, it'll be the Los Angeles Chargers. Fire away.
No, I'm with you on that. I'll be honest with you. I was thinking people make so much of their receiver situation, but if you look at Jim Harbaugh historically, the teams he's had, he's really never had phenomenal receivers. I mean, when he was in the Niners, Michael Crabtree was the guy. He had an old Anquan Bolden, an old Randy Moss. If you followed him at Michigan, Roman Wilson is probably the highest drafted. I think maybe Nico Collins. They only had a couple guys. go really high in the draft. And so they were workman-like dudes there. So I think the guys he has there are perfect for what they want to do. That he wants to have a team. He's not trying to build a showcase all-star type thing. He wants to have a team. So the guys who are there making that team have a fit.
Yeah, and I think they have the potential for the offensive line to come together now. I mean, they've got 2 premium tackles if they're healthy. So that keeps Herbert up on his feet, allows him to do the things he wants to do. Sam, crazy to put the Chargers anywhere near this list?
I just think it's too early. I mean, you mentioned what was it on the Lions that you said you could see him potentially being on there next year. I think that's the team you mentioned. Like the Chargers are that team for me. I just think it's a year too early. I do have major questions about their wide receivers, the guys that Herbert's going to be throwing to.
Hey,
in
Sam,
general.
Let me stop you real quick. If I said to you the Houston Texans were going to be a playoff team with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz catching passes, the quarterback against the Chargers is pretty good.
Yeah, I think Herbert's terrific, but I do think there's a key difference, which is the Texans had built a roster with a salary cap to include a rookie quarterback. The Chargers built a roster with the quarterback paid at the top of the NFL.
Fair point. It's a great point.
So I don't think the middle of the roster is comparable between the Chargers and the Texans. And it's the reasons they had to get rid of their wide receivers this offseason. And like I am not a believer in Quentin Johnson at all. So I don't think he's a solution for this issue. And everyone but Patrick Mahomes last year has proven that you got to have somebody to throw the ball to.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. Anyone else, Jeff, that you had that you were considering for the list?
The Jets. The Jets were competing with the Texans for the last spot, and I know there's always drama over there with what's going on with the quarterback, and people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. But defensively, they're still strong. If they're able to stay healthy, that's always the caveat with this team. They could be dangerous, but it's too risky of a pick when you're asking Mike Williams and Tyron Smith and Rodgers, all these guys who've had significant injuries within the last year or two to all be able to make it through an entire season. They were close, but Texans got my vote over them.
Okay. Yeah, health was the same reason for me, but not just physical health, also mental health for that team. So
I'm not buying the Jets. I need to see it before I get in on the Jets on that one. I do. It is a talented roster, and obviously if Aaron Rodgers can still spin it, they can be dangerous, but I'm not buying the Jets. Listen, if you have any issues with your parking lot, whether it's building a brand new one or just getting it brightly striped to cut down on accidents, Gann Asphalt and Concrete has you covered. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. And if you've been hurt in an accident, a work injury, whatever it might be, Northland Injury Law, voted #1 accident lawyer in Kansas City. Go ahead and give them a call at 816-400-HURT or text 22222. That's 22222. You can text HURT to 22222 24/7 to reach our friends at Northland Injury Law. For Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network and NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold.